What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with Shawn Coleman from Locked On Grizzlies, as the Grizzlies are the number 2 team in the NBA behind the efforts of Ja Morant. What has Ja done to take the leap this season for the Grizzlies to be in the mix for the MVP conversation? Who is the most unsung hero of this Grizzlies team, and what does the playoff outlook look like for the Memphis Grizzlies? But first, a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because it is that time of year again. We've got March Madness in full swing, and you know that BetOnline has you covered with all the latest odds, contests, and player props. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains your best spot for when it comes to sports scores, podcasts, news, everything that you need. BetOnline has you covered. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Joining us now is Shawn Coleman, the host of Locked On Grizzlies. You can follow on Twitter at StatsSAC. Shawn, this Grizzlies team is looking mighty impressive as we are nearing the tail end of this NBA season. Not just the second best team in the Western Conference, the second best team in the NBA as a whole, at least by as far as win percentage is concerned, which I'm sure has you nice and giddy over there. But at the heart of everything the Grizzlies do is Ja Morant, and he's had a really impressive, transcendent season. What to you has been the biggest thing that stood out, as he's taken the leap this year?
Oh, it's the consistency. It's the over. First off, how are you, Jackson? You doing all right today?
I'd be doing better if the Rockets had managed to pick up another win against your Grizzlies. But other than that, I'm doing just fine, Shawn. Thank you.
Oh, I wasn't even going to bring that up. 24-point win, 122-98. What were we talking about? Ja Morant. Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought you were going to talk about Desmond Bane after he annihilated y'all. Anywho, so Ja Morant. Basically it's the resourcefulness. I've said it all season long. It's not as if his 3-point shot certainly has taken a step forward. His ability to impact games with it. It hasn't happened, just every game, but it is certainly there. But he's a streaky 3-point shooter. That probably will remain the case at least early in his career, and it may be the case for his entire career. But it's the eye-opening ability for him to consistently get into the lane, whether it be making shots that none of us know how he did it or getting to the free throw line. It's just a consistency of scoring, but it's also the ability to take the reins back a little bit. And if he needs to, he can set up his own teammates as well. But just being one of the, a lot of times I like to look at the statistics when it comes to assists and points as to how much was a player responsible for directly. He's one of the best sources night in and night out of 45, 50, 55 points, whether it be his scoring or him contributing to other scoring. He's one of the best bets to directly contribute to that level of scoring night in and night out, and that certainly is a great start for any offense. His resourcefulness is what stands out to me.
This Grizzlies team, just from top to bottom, seems like such a well-rounded team, especially when you consider the fact that even without Ja Morant, they tend to still function like a well-oiled machine, just, be it next man up mentality, guys knowing their roles, but also still being able to deliver even in the absence of their star players. So who on this Grizzlies team, you shouted out Desmond Bane, gave him his flowers for his performance against the Rockets, but who on this Grizzlies team is maybe the unsung hero, the guy that doesn't get enough praise that he does, that he should?
It's the two other bigs besides Jaren Jackson Jr., and that is, Brandon Clark and Steven Adams. And it's hard for me to leave out Tyus Jones. It's hard to stepping up for Ja Morant. But the reason I go with Adams and Brandon Clark is because they are the ones that have likely the biggest impact on two areas where the Grizzlies truly are elite compared to the NBA. That's obviously protecting the rim. Brandon Clark does that along with Jaren Jackson Jr., but especially for those two, it's offensive rebounding. The Grizzlies' ability to get that possession edge game in and game out, to even if the three-point shooting's not there, we're still able to win because of the quantity of twos that we get. But when both of those players are out there in the lineup, that's 40 consistent minutes of great presence around both the defensive and offensive rim. going with Jaren Jackson Jr., you have one of the best front court trios out there. So I would certainly say, even though you don't see the threes from Brandon Clark, even though you don't see the scoring from Steven Adams, the overall ability for them to get offensive rebounds, second chance points, and just their paint presence on both ends of the courts, that consistently is a nice supporting aspect when it comes to the Grizzlies and their main players.
And not in terms of Steven Adams as well, and not to take anything away from Ja Morant, but I think one of the things too that has really stood out to me, at least this year with the Grizzlies, is the impact of Steven Adams as a screener, right? Screening is something that I don't think we give enough credit to sometimes at the NBA level, and how important that is for creating an advantage offensively. And when you've got Steven Adams, a moving brick wall, setting screens for you, it creates some really advantageous opportunities for Ja.
Are you trying to start the narrative here, Jackson, that Ja wouldn't be who he is without Jonas Valanciunas or Steven Adams over the past 3 years? Is that what you're trying to do?
I am pushing false narratives here on Locked on NBA. No, again, I had to preface it, but he has had an enormous impact, offensively as well for this Grizzlies team, even if it doesn't always translate just directly into points on the box score, right?
I'm sorry, I was pushing this L into the center of the screen to represent the Rockets' efforts today if we're going to push narratives. Anywho, you're absolutely right. The support from Steven Adams has been incredible. It's nice to have someone who just enjoys contributing to the game without having to be a high usage centerpiece. Nothing against Jonas Valanciunas. The reason why he was of higher usage is because he could be utilized more. He has more capabilities as a scorer and a post, source of scoring than Steven Adams does. But Steven Adams' overall ability, he knows how to use his body. He's intelligent. He knows where he needs to be. The passing has certainly emerged, but you're absolutely right. He has been a star in support, and it really has played a big part. That's why the numbers are so good when he is on the court with Jaren, Ja, and others this year. He absolutely has been a star in support and a needed one for the Grizzlies to take their next step as a team.
Shawn, we've got the playoffs right around the corner. Right now, what is the biggest area of concern for this Grizzlies team, or potentially just their biggest weakness as we're looking to move into postseason play?
It's the shooting. That's the consistent theme when it comes to the Grizzlies. It's the overall shooting half court offense. If you take away what they're very good at, the producing on the hustle, producing on offensive rebounds, limiting their ability to create turnovers and clogging the paint, can the Grizzlies then use effective ball movement and convert enough of their open opportunities when it comes to shooting the basketball to be able to win games? That's something that the Jazz were able to adjust to last year. It's not only that, it's the Grizzlies' ability to defend the three. You got to shoot the three and you got to defend the three. From covering the Rockets in the middle of last decade with Harden, how big both those opportunities were. And so it consistently is the case when it comes to the playoffs. But beyond that, individually, I do have a bit of a concern. We see injuries starting to really impact teams both in positive and negative ways. You've got people coming back like Draymond and Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. potentially, other players like that. Then you have some players who potentially are going to be out for a while. You got obviously CP3, Steph, others as well. The thing that concerns me on an individual level, Ja Morant's knee. Now, I'm saying this, I don't think that there's anything major going on. But this is now the third or fourth time we've seen Ja Morant miss because of a knee injury. If you remember earlier this year, he missed because of a knee injury for about 10 or 11 games. Is it the same thing? Is it going to be a maintenance tolerance issue? Unfortunately, does it potentially put him at risk, more than normal to have a bigger injury potentially happen? It's going to be interesting as he's now playing more basketball than he ever has. That's one concern. Also, the consistency of Jaren Jackson Jr. Jackson, I've told you before multiple times, his activity, his presence on both ends of the court, to me, is the single most important contributing factor to how far the Grizzlies will go in the playoffs this year. So it goes to our two stars. As amazing as they've been, the health of Ja Morant, the consistency of Jaren Jackson Jr., those are things that I'm not necessarily concerned are going to turn out, worst case scenario, but I'm certainly hoping the best case scenario happens for both.
I'm glad you hit us with the injury update, or at least levels of concern regarding Ja, since he wasn't, there for the game, the whooping of the Houston Rockets against the Memphis Grizzlies, to use some of your terminology vernacular. Ass kicking. All right, there we go. We'll go with that, I suppose. But I'm glad you got us covered on that base, Shawn. Last thing here for you.
Clear ass kicking. Clear ass kicking.
Oh man, this is just turning into a Shawn Coleman slam session of the Houston Rockets. I love it. On Locked on NBA. This isn't even for Locked on Rockets, which is incredible. With that, Shawn, last thing here, just, with the way that the playoff picture is shaping up, there's still a little bit of time. Things could move around, but as it currently stands, Grizzlies, the number 2 seed, kind of looking down the barrel of playing one of the Timberwolves or the Clippers coming out of that play-in matchup currently. Which of those teams do you think poses a more difficult matchup as a potential first-round opponent for the Grizzlies?
Yeah, it's a very good question and an excellent question from you, sir. As always, I always enjoy talking with you, Jackson. Also, just to be clear, before I answer that question on Ja Morant, I want to make sure that it's understood. There's nothing major, nothing just overall concerning. He likely will be back, especially with ESPN coming to Memphis. He'll likely be back on Wednesday. I'm just saying, to what level is this injury going to, maintain his ability to play? We'll see. I don't think anything major is coming of it. Just, something to watch. But to your question about who is the biggest matchup, listen, stylistically, as well as roster-wise, personnel-wise, the Timberwolves are a very tough matchup for the Grizzlies. They've got the length and they've got the athleticism to really give Ja a consistent coverage that could limit him from really taking over games in a playoffs matchup. And their three-headed monster of D'Angelo Russell, who the Grizzlies just he absolutely goes off against the Grizzlies. Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, they definitely are a strong trio that could give the Grizzlies problems in the first round. Of course, though, the biggest storyline is this, listen, if rosters are as they are right now, all day long, I'd rather take on the Clippers. That absolutely is the truth. But even if they're coming off injury and they've not had that big of a ramp up, Paul George, the return of Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, could they come back? I'll be honest with you. If it's both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, I would probably rather take on the Timberwolves. But if it's just one of them and they're coming off an injury, I could see myself saying I would rather have the Clippers. So the injury updates, the injury outlook for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard probably would be the biggest factor on who I would rather play. Because I'm telling you, I think the Grizzlies would beat either teams, if only one of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard come back, or the Timberwolves. But the Timberwolves are an incredibly tough matchup for the Grizzlies. They have been for the past 2 seasons.
Can the Grizzlies carry their regular season success into the postseason and make a deep playoff run? How far will Ja Morant and company go? Shawn, you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Grizzlies. I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
It's always an absolute pleasure, Jackson. You know that. Thanks for having me, bud. We'll talk to you again soon.